Well, hello there.
Hello there. I was not ready for that to stop yet. I need at least one more loop through.
Gotcha. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We are here for part two with the interview with Mr. Joe Kramar. We had a great show with him last time. Talked about all the alternative threads and all the crazy stuff that he's done in his career. Um, and we invited him back to kind of expand on that information and hopefully he can get you some good information on specifics as far as threads and needles and stabilizers and whatnot. So
We did have a lot of questions, and not a lot of them got answered. So we're dedicating this one more towards answering the questions that you guys have, and hopefully there are some good ones. But we'll go ahead and bring in Joe. Hey, Joe, how's it going?
It's going great. Good to see you guys again.
you too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Glad you made it back.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much. So, yeah, I'm excited to be here once again, and really excited to share some knowledge. So I'm digesting a lot of this as well, as far as what's the best way, for me to reach out to folks asking for this. I don't want to say elevated to put down traditional embroidery, but a different point of view, on embroidering, and so I've been all you folks out there listening, and with all the feedback from the last show. I mean, thank you so much. We couldn't have this without you, so we really appreciate all the time and effort you've taken to write and to to ping us and to let us know some of the questions and concerns and challenges that you have had trying to make some of this stuff work. And I'm going to do my best today to run through some of these caveats, if you will, and help folks, just generally push through some of the questions that they may have to actually execute some of these things. So I'm excited to be here, gentlemen. Thank you again for having me back.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming.
So I think one of the first things that we kind of glazed over last time. We didn't have enough time. Almost like, if you guys don't mind, let's talk a little bit about some of the washaway backing scenarios in which it's ideal. Because a lot of the techniques I have to share with you do involve a washaway backing, and I did continuously see that there were questions specifically about, like, what, I don't want to say what it is. I think most people understand that it is an interfacing that is water soluble. But I think that it's important to let folks know that you cannot just take an interfacing like washaway backing and simply just replace it with maybe a light tearaway or something that you may already be using. It is not designed for dense embroidery, plain and simple. It is designed for sparse embroidery where you have you don't have a very dense file to begin with. So if you have a very intricate design that's already challenging yourself with tearaway, and of course, especially with cutaway, if it's already giving you problems, a washaway is going to absolutely surrender to that scenario. So if you do, those who've, and we'll show some examples here, but those who've joined my classes, again, thank you for being there at those classes, everybody. All the samples that I had, none of them were of dense embroidery. It was all very sparse. If it was Burmilana, the density was like 1.1, 1.2. If it was Tex 40, the density was closer to like 0.5, and of course anything in the middle, like a Tex 60 type of thread was going to be, right around like 0.7 or something like that, 0.8 for a density.
Let me jump in here. Yeah. And I want to ask you a question, because if I remember right, I was on your site, appliquejoe.com.
Yeah.
And I'm totally dropping your stuff. So we'll throw some links. But if
they already stalked me. Yeah.
Yeah. On your appliquejoe.com, I believe you had some type of it was either a slide or an image or something that kind of gave a reference point for what text size to what density.
Yeah, that's a great point. So I did cover this the last show, but I definitely want to reiterate this because I feel like it lands differently with everyone. and I decided to actually create a graphic that really helps to show everything I'm talking about. But basically, in a laboratory setting, a setting where I can take samples of these threads, and I can tape them, put a little bit of tension on them, tape them down, and try to emulate what they would look like if they were actually running through your machine, if they were actually running onto, a flat substrate, i.e., fabric with, backing, etc. What's the diameter of the thread? How thick would that actually be? And what I found in the laboratory was this, there's actually a correlation to the text weight, and the diameter of that text weight can actually be measured. So what I did to actually, is a whole lot of work that went into this one slide, but basically it's, I took, just so you guys know, this is the setting. I took a
One
mic.
sec. Is this the one
Yeah.
that you have? You want us to pull it up on screen?
Yeah. Let's pull
Your
this
slide.
up.
All
Yeah.
right. Let's go ahead and pull it up here.
Perfect. So what I have here is, in fact, I'll do, yeah, there we go. So maybe this is a little bit better. It doesn't matter. So what I have basically with this slide is you have a couple of scenarios where on the left, this is going to be what everyone now is using right now, the 40 weight thread. It's going to be closest to a Tex 27. And to set this up, to get you to understand at home, watching everybody, that the ruler you're seeing in the back is it's a microscope calibration slide, and it's showing from the 0 to 1 to, it's showing that's basically that's a millimeter. And so what you're looking at is tenths of a millimeter in between there. So I strung the strings, the threads across there, so you guys can see that the Tex 27 is just shy of basically 3/10, also known as 0.27 of a millimeter. You'll also notice too that the 40 weight thread there on the left is asked specifically. I just want everyone to see this is what like your isocord is going to look like. I think that's actually a piece of black isocord right there that I took a picture of. So the other relationship I have to this particular piece is the needle size range that you would typically use for something like this. Again, it's just a range. If you're comfortable with a different size of needle, great, use that needle, but that's just a range as to what I've found to be successful. Comparing the first column to the second column, it really isn't much different other than the fact that it's a Tex 30 sewing needle, or excuse me, sewing thread, and the needle that you're using is going to be a little bit bigger. You can still use a 70-10 if you're good enough to thread it, but I found that the little hairs, the little furries on the outside wrap of the sewing thread can kind of hinder. If it's the end of the day and you're feeling pretty, I don't know, fatigued and frustrated, you're probably going to be switching to a 75-11 or an 80-12 to get it threaded, a little easier. But that diameter of a Tex 30 is right around Tex 30. So to reiterate, Tex size has a relative relationship between the diameter and the Tex weight that they call it. So a Tex 40 is going to have, it's going to be about 0.4 of a millimeter. And of course, Milana there on the right, which is the nastiest looking one of them all, is going to be 0.77. So I didn't have, I just realized now that I probably need to put some densities with that too, just so you can kind of see the range. But at least you get an idea that this is where you're starting from right here. This is the logic of being able to digitize for threads that are not conventional, if you will. This relates a lot to there was a question, Jeff, I don't know how we want to pull that up, but one of the questions that we got from Ramona was she was trying to use a sewing thread Tex 30 with the 116. So I kind of, when I saw that comment, honestly, that was really fueled my motivation to make this chart, because it helps to kind of keep things in bound. So if you're going to put a larger thread into, or excuse me, a larger needle and a larger thread into a piece of dainty fabric, it has to be a sparse density. You cannot punch it for a Tex 30. So if you're running a Tex 30 weight sewing thread, you definitely want to be punching that at a, I want to say you're probably going to be close to 0.4, whereas normally it'd be like a 0.38 or something like that. Probably want to get the skosh less dense, and then try to use the smallest needle that you can. So to bring all this back, when you punch these files into a piece of material, let's say like a piece of washaway backing, and I'll just tell you, rule of thumb, if you're new to washaway backing, use 2 pieces until you get confident with just 1 piece. The other thing with washaway backing is you have to go to all the edges of the hoop. Do not use washaway backing by like sliding it under and trying to cheat by like you would like hoop a jacket or a backpack or something and then just slide the backing underneath it. You need the washaway to go all 4 corners because you need it to be tight. You need it to hold everything. They do make a washaway that has a PSA on it, so you can just peel off the back and press it onto the back of your garment, and then you can sew from there. And it holds really, really well, and you can get away with quite a bit. So that's one major, I should say, correlation to all of this, and I hope that makes sense to all that are hearing this. That you need to know that the needle size is really for a larger size of thread. So if you have a Tex 30, then use up to like an 80-12. I wouldn't go bigger than that because you're just going to make Swiss cheese out of your fabric at that point. And then go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
Let's pull this. Justin, let's pull yours back up here because there are coordinating questions from Ramona. So she says, so in the far upper left, that is a 0.5 density with the 116 needle.
Yep.
And it's on a 5-ounce shirt. And so she says, so maybe a smaller needle, maybe the size 14.
For a Tex 30, I would just use 7511s or whatever smallest one you can get away with threading. Even an 80-12 would work, fairly nicely with this. But I think that there's 2 things going on. And the other thing too is maybe Ramona can chime in. Did she wash it? Okay, so there's the after wash. Looks like.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think this one is the after wash, I believe.
Yeah.
What was her note here? Hold on. Take a look. 1B is after wash and dry. So yeah, this is after wash and dry.
Yeah. And then we have the point. So she did a 0.5 density, and then let's see, we also have.
Yeah, it looks like she went in increments of 5.
Yeah. And then I was just curious if there was a make and model of thread that she wanted to use or you ended up using, and why.
The only note, like she could probably answer, the only note is that it's sewing thread.
Yeah, sewing thread, yeah.
So generally, it's the comments come in about 8 to 10 seconds.
Of course.
After when we say something to when they hear it and can respond.
Of course, yeah. So we'll see that pop up.
Not only techniques like this, do you you have to be aware of your materials and your stabilizers and whatnot, but just like any alternative embroidery 3D puff, you have to also recognize what designs are going to work well with these particular, set of scenarios.
Right.
Okay,
yeah.
So Ramona did just chime in. She says it's a sewing thread from Amon. So it's a Tex 30 because she couldn't get Tex 40.
Okay. So there, from my understanding, the sewing thread equivalent of what we'll be using, and what I mean by the equivalent, because Amon has a lot of products, not just Isocord. Isocord's like a very small line of their global, offerings. Is Saba. Saba is one of the best. In fact, I see Saba in the majority of like Ralph Lauren, Polo retail, garments is Saba.
Is that SABA?
SABA, yeah, from Amman. There are others. Coates and Clark makes let's see here, spun polyester. They also make, I think, dual duty. Okay, yeah, Ramona just verified Saba is what she used. So what I'll go ahead and do for Ramona, and then I definitely want to circle back around and show you guys. I'm gonna make a recipe for her, and I'll send her a file, and then I think that'll help kind of kick things off in the right direction, as well as, okay, here's some different thread thicknesses to try, and here's the files that correlate with each needle and thread combo for each stitch file. And that will be probably one of the best tests to show what it does, because using Text 30, it's nice to use it, but if you really want to get away from cupping and shrinking, and you have to treat the garment like you're trying to not touch it any more than you absolutely have to. And that frame of mind is what allows you to have nice, flat, fluffy, and yet non-invasive embroidery on, let's say, a 4.5 ounce chemical reactive dye garment. It's hard to be so specific, but I don't want anybody putting this on a pigment going, this is crap. It's gonna fail on a pigment. It's just the way it is.
So there's definitely more finesse when it comes to this.
Yeah, it is. And the only way to really learn is exactly what Ramona's doing, is to try different things to make sure that it works. But I mean, a good tatami zigzag and then go back over the top with a slightly larger satin is a great place to start, because you really get an idea of what like Text 40 is going to do. I would shoot for, I know Ramona said she had some difficulty with finding Text 40, but Text 40 is the next step beyond just regular sized embroidery, 40 weight thread. So I would definitely try to key off on that and pick some of that up. And Amman should have that readily available, especially in their Colorado offices. I know that they distribute out of there, and those guys are amazing. And I don't know if I'm just spoiled, but they give me everything I want. So,
well, if I remember right, and I might get crucified over this later, but you can set up a direct wholesale account with Amman.
From what I understand, yeah, I hope that is not an untrue statement as well.
I will get it later if it is.
I know. Please forgive me. I'm more of a developer than I am, running my own embroidery shop. So please don't hang me on the cross either for that. But it is readily available, and I love the color book for that thing. It's just the Saba color book is just you can't even look at it all on your desk. It's just so massive, and they're such a great product.
Sweet.
So anyway, I hope that at least gives a little bit of an idea as to what is available for and where your mind really has to be in order to run these things. Just think of it. I'll give you some examples too. Like baseball scripts are great because you can take your time with your long stitch lengths, and even if you have to do some satin splitting, it's not going to affect the density of what you're doing. So if you got to split it at 8 or 9, because that's where your machine likes that sweet spot before it starts jumping, then that's what you set it to. And it's nice to have like a nice baseball tail, and you get a chance to really have some great opportunity there. So and then also I have I'll show you this production cone size. This is Text 30 of sewing thread. This is Coates and Clark right here. This is spun polyester. This would be like a thicker version of like Astor bobbins right here, but just in a production cone, so it's a little furry. And then this is the Text 40 equivalent.
Wow. I
mean, you just went up a little bit in size of thread, but this is how much larger the cone is when it sits on your machine, So, and then of course, this is run down a little bit. This is not quite a full cone, but that's a full cone of Text 30 right there. Text 27, Text 30 right there. So there's my background, but that's the idea.
Machine itself, as long as you have the proper threads to needles and whatnot. The machine itself, have you seen any limitations on any type of machine brand?
No. Probably a blanket statement that I should say here is that If you've got a machine at home or in your shop, in your facility, that's newer than 15 years old, God bless you. Because most of the things that I've worked on are older machines. All the techniques that I've done have been on older machines. So if the older machines that I have access to, um, can do it, I know that the newer machines can. And it's really just a matter of they're not as rickety. The hook will absolutely catch the loop every time.
Right.
I mean, the reason why we did all of our zigzag stitches on the outside of all of our letters, in the past with some of these shops I've worked with at that had older machines, was we did double pass zigzags because we weren't guaranteed it was going to catch every zigzag. And if you have one tooth missing, your eye goes right to it. And so that's another blessing when you're doing like destroyed graphics, is if you're messing it up in the first place, then a missing stitch here and there isn't going to destroy your day.
Right.
Especially if it's, but if you're trying to do everything perfect, then it's just not going to work out. So I don't know if I'll give a quick shout out to just washing in general is an art form. I've interviewed with companies in the past where they wanted to bring me on with my palette of tools, and I told them, you guys have an amazing facility. You got laser bridges, you got all these heads of embroidery that are all new, but you don't have a wash facility. I'd rather you guys get yourself a wash facility than bring me on. And you bring me on after you get this wash facility put together, because the washing is so much of what these vintage techniques can offer. And I feel like that's like the sweet spot of smaller shops. So if you're a smaller shop, you have 6 heads or right in that little range where you don't have, you got that 72 to 144 piece orders. These are great techniques because you're not having to go down to the laundromat and explain why 3,000 of these garments need to be washed and rinsed and folded and boxed and
You
tagged.
get that dry cleaning ticket.
It's a little bit of an awkward conversation, to make that happen. So I just wanted to add that as well, that washing is everything. I'll show you guys an example. If you guys caught my video that I let out from Amber I think I let it out like Friday. We were doing this little project for Broncos, and it was a project where I wanted to show how the wash really affects everything. And I'll go ahead and throw a link down here so you guys can watch a video if you haven't subscribed to Amber, but Amber on YouTube, Amber with the 3 creative. But I'll show you real quick what I'm talking about, because this is one of the pieces that I have that shows, this is folks, this is one layer of 100% cotton canvas twill, and it doesn't really, when you first look at it and you see me actually make this thing, it just doesn't seem like it's that thick, like that there's that much variation to the letters, but there's a tremendous amount of 3-dimensional effort and result. And this is all done with the wash comes out of the wash. It looks just like that. I didn't trim anything around the edges. I didn't touch it. This is just proper fabric placement, cutting the letters properly at an angle at a 45-degree bias. And those are all hand placed letters. So there's no other way I know of to get the edges to fluff like that. You have to wash it. The other thing too is that, and you can't really see it in the camera here, but the edges that fluff up like that, they really add a lot to the like it pulls some of the pigment dye, from the garment. It'll pull a little bit of the color in just to make it look even more vintage, which is a really cool property as well. And I'll show you here an example of this. Is let's see here. This is one of the I'm gonna pull it up here. This is one of the Amber hoodies that we did. I'll just put it in front of this one so you guys can see it. forgive some of the wrinkles here. I haven't gotten a chance to get all the stuff out of it, but you can see real quick where the embroidery thread has a completely different look and feel, on this garment than something tonal. It still has a place in this industry, still looks cool, but that's embroidery thread for you, So
And is an alternative to washing, can you roughen up the edges like using a wire brush or something like that?
you certainly can. You certainly can. It will never look as good.
Mm-hmm.
You certainly can. Nothing wrong with that. But I've got some. I'll try to get this one in the shot here because it's definitely one of my favorites here. And this is just that's a fill on the inside of the shield, and then a couple rows of chain on the outside, and then just some satin for the wings and the little top crest part, and this satin for the bird, and that's it. Or for
And
the
what
yeah.
thread was used on this one?
So this is Burma Lana, and I don't know. There's probably less than 5,000 stitches here. It's probably 4, maybe 4,500. It's not a lot, but this is an old dusty Kona Burma Lana right there. So this was in the densities. I remember the fill was, I think, 1.1-ish, something like that, and I think that the outside little feathers or the wings were 1.2. But you can, yeah, exactly. I'm seeing these comments come through. Yeah, dog shedding brush works good for fraying edges. Absolutely. There's a lot of great techniques out there. I've just never been able to get the same effect of washing it. It just, nothing will look like when you actually wash the garment and get it, because you want that garment to like beat up the other garments that are in there. Get your friends together and beat up on the applique, because that's really where it looks the best. So, but anyway, I'll show this piece too. This is a good piece to show in live. Is this koi fish here, which was just over, I think it's right around 12,000 stitches total. Let's see if I can't get it all in the frame here.
So on both of these pieces, did you use the wash away backing then?
Absolutely. So this is 100% wash away backing on this one. Let's see here. Get a little bit further zoomed out here. And then if you want to see the wash away backing side of it, I mean, there's nothing in there.
Gone.
Just super soft. Now
the Burma Lana or sewing, you said?
This is Burma Lana. Yeah. I have some sewing actually. Hold on. Let me see what I have for sewing. All right, here's I'll give you an example here. Text 40. This is text 40. So I have this is a whip stitch in text 40, and I believe I just did a 3-pass with it. Let me see if I can get this on here, and then I'm gonna have to zoom in a little bit because it's just a left chest over a screen print. But that right there is a text 40, 3-pass whip stitch, and I think I went around it with some sort of a bean, probably 3-pass bean, just to trim in the edges a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But that over the top of, looks like I did like maybe a 1 color or 2 color, screen print, it really pops nice
Right.
for no more than it was. It's just not a huge file. That's quite a bit of an impact, especially that vintage look. So again, this is text 40. So I don't remember exactly the density. I know I have these files stuffed away somewhere in an archive, but it's all manageable densities. This was text 40, so I was using most likely an 8012 needle and wash away backing. So nothing on the back of it. So actually, this was, I don't know if you guys heard of this. Is actually, I apologize, I got that wrong. This is tearaway wash away. You guys have heard of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is, so I'm gonna hold it here in front of the camera, get it to zoom in here for me. But this is where the fibers are. Come on, bro, help me out here. The fibers are still trapped, in there, and the bonding agent is what's water soluble, and that results in just a totally different experience as well, where the inside is nice and soft. The downside is if you had a large vat that you were washing, you were doing several at a time, you would actually get a lot of those little pieces of cellulose kind of on the garments, and it plugs up your lint trap pretty quick if you have massive amounts of backing. But for a small left chest like that, it's actually really easy.
So as far as the water soluble backing, is there different variants within that category, different weights or anything like that?
There is not to my knowledge. There's basically just one value that I'm aware of. At least, back in my day, that's all we had. If there's more, great. And if your supplier has, a couple different for you to try, great. I only know of the one. I do know that the two variations that I know, basically the one that does not have a pressure sensitive adhesive on it, and the one that does, the PSA version is a little bit heavier, just the nature of the adhesive, right?
Yeah.
But if you're having a design kind of like this koi fish, and you're having a little bit of trouble getting it hooped, so that that backing's not moving, because the last thing you want is the backing to slide around and the top fabric to slide around during a file this crucial. You would definitely want to use a piece of the PSA, because it'll secure like 100% of that fabric, as opposed to a piece that doesn't have PSA. Then it would secure most of it, the 85-90% that it needs to for you to be successful. So anyway, I hope that gives an idea, right, of what it's used for. So you're not just taking, again, I can't reiterate enough, you're not going to take a standard super dense file and just take it right over to a piece of weak jersey and just pound it in and throw some wash away backing on it and change out your thread from text from a 40 weight to like a text 30 and expect results. That's pretty much not really changing you really have to go to different artwork, different way of thinking in order to pull that off.
So pros and cons between the PSA and the regular wash away would be, I would assume the PSA is a little bit more expensive.
Yes.
Possibly can gum up your needles at some point, depending on how much you're running.
Yes.
But it's going to give you that little bit more stability, like you're saying, where that garment's not going to go anywhere.
Right. Exactly. It's definitely going to be able to do that. But again, like I said before, unless you have, that file was unique because of how big that particular fish, that koi fish, was on there. If it was something a little bit smaller that fit maybe inside of like an 8-inch medallion hoop, I probably wouldn't think of it too much. But, and there's another sample that I show in the classes. This is Bormalana. This is punched at 1.2. This is on a piece of 4.3 ounce chemical dyed jersey. This is with wash away backing, and It is incredibly soft and it's incredibly flat. It doesn't really have any curl to it. It drapes and flows with the fabric naturally.
I was able to see this one in Long Beach, and it's definitely the way he's describing it is, yeah, it's dead on, super soft. You wouldn't, it's a good size center chest design, and you wouldn't think that you can pull off something like that on a t-shirt and
Yeah.
and
And,
not.
and this is 8,200 stitches right here, probably running on an older machine about maybe 600 from right in there. And I'd say that the throw lengths that you guys see here, I mean that those are pushing it, man. Those are getting to close to 12, on the length there. But it'll do it. You just don't. You wanna punch files where you're like pushing the limits of what your machine can do before it starts to do its little jump stitch action, just so that you're not holding yourself up. So if you have to do some satin splits, and that's what you got to do. And a good example of a garment with some satin splits are right here in our good buddy Joe's Crab Shack sample over here, because this guy, he's got let's see if I can get it. He's got split satins in the Joe's part, because there's no way I could go. That's almost, that's far. That's almost 2 centimeters right there. For how thick that is. But this file as well is less than 10,000 stitches, even with the fill stitch in there.
Right.
So it's another good piece to show for again the Burmolana style. Same as before. There's no. I ended up using just to test it, this wash away. I'm gonna flip the shirt inside out so you can see it a little better. But I ended up using that wash away tear away material. It was more of, this is one of those like experimental garments I have for trying things that were, honestly, I was bored with the wash away, so I was trying different things just to see if you could do it. So that's the wash away tear away material, and that's all the little tear away fibers that are still stuck underneath the knot of the Burmolana stitching. And I mean, I'll just tell you right now, I mean, my tensions were off. I mean, this looks it's just kind of how Burmolana runs. The longer they are, the longer the stitch length. I don't have any problems with the bobbins popping through, and seeing bobbin, but it's just kind of the nature of Burmolana. It doesn't run through.
Yeah, in any of these, you're not going to get, doing the everyday designs and the corporate designs that I'm pretty much doing 90% of the time. Of course, things like coverage and density and making sure that the letters are all solid with no gaps. That's kind of the look that you're used to. Going to these alternative threads and whatnot, this is definitely the look that goes along with those type of alternative threads. You're not looking for full coverage. You're not looking for a bulletproof design. You're going to expect those gaps. You're going to expect that kind of vintage look, and you're not trying to hammer. You're fighting against yourself when you're trying to use these wash away backings and going on t-shirts if you want full coverage and you want to hammer those stitches in there.
Right. Yeah, you're exactly right.
Yeah.
This is not. These techniques are not for someone trying to just pound stitches into, a garment. It's just not designed for that.
Exactly.
Again, you want to touch it. You want to touch that garment the least amount possible, for that to be successful. So, so that's what I would have to say. Now, Ramona was asking too if like spray adhesive would work instead of like the PSA. I would say I'd be careful with that, because I think the biggest reason why is it is a water soluble product, and there's a lot of silicones and things, and wash away backing is made out of polyvinyl alcohol, and the one chemistry that would be its absolute demise and kryptonite, if you will, would be the I would have to say it would have to be the silicone. because silicone is a plasticizer. And as a plasticizer, what you end up with is a really cool way to basically turn that polyvinyl alcohol into plastic, and then it won't wash away, and then you're stuck with it. So I would be very careful doing any kind of spray adhesives onto that particular scenario. But if you were doing a left chest logo, I mean, you could try it, but I honestly think that if you're just hooping, if you're doing left chest logo, you should have plenty of circle left on your hoop to cover. Just make sure your wash away exceeds your hoop size, so you're hooping all of it, both fabrics, the backing and the top fabric together, so it's as secure as it can be.
Right.
It's great question there.
Yeah, let's. I think we got some questions going here, so let's try to jump into some of these.
Yeah, let's dive in.
Got this one right here. How much of a change will the digitizing need to accommodate a Tex 40?
Not much. So if you were at a satin stitch of like 0.367, something like that, in your digitizing program, you could go to I would go to like a 0.45 to 0.48, somewhere in there, and you'll probably start hitting some good densities. Obviously, everybody's digitizing software is a little bit different, but I would like to think that it's all the same, but it's not. It varies a little bit. So I would try to increase. You definitely don't want to put 40 in a 30 file. I mean, it's probably not going to hurt anything, but you're going to absolutely make Swiss cheese out of that piece of fabric. So
Right.
Definitely want to back it off a little bit. And I know that on screen, you're like, your brain's going to tell you it's not dense enough. And just trust me, by the time you stitch it out, you use a piece of wash away and you go to wash it, it's going to look sparse. And as soon as you wash it, thread's going to shrink a little, the fabric's going to shrink a little, there's no more backing on there. It'll all resolve to a nice fill. So just remember that it's not done until it's washed, even though the majority of our listeners and supporters are going to be they're not going to wash anything. So,
Right.
But just know that the wash is a really big component of making all of this work with wash away backing.
And that's actually, there's a pretty good statement here. I believe this is Jeremy, right?
Yeah, that's Jeremy.
For retail, 100% invest in the wash. If it's giveaway or staff, then they can do it. And you just
that's true. That's true. That's very true. Yeah. Or tell people don't take pictures of it until after you wash it, or something like that. If it's a employee program, but yes, I mean, if especially for Amber, for our employee programs, we're doing everything we can to wash them, just because we want to be front and center. So we want it to be like finished, in the wash. So, but yeah, I would say that, I have a tendency to always want it to be as perfect as it can possibly be. So I'm going to wash it every time.
Okay. And
more questions here, right?
Let's see here. We have the spray adhesive versus PSA.
Tex 40, that's going to be one of your more available things. I was cruising Etsy the other day, and I was finding those small little cones of like Tex 40 that they had available. So just know that those small little cones are plenty for you to try this off of. It'll go onto the back of your machine, your put up, and just note that you want to kind of watch it and make sure it's unspooling appropriately, because the tapered spool is designed to unspool a bit better than some of those cones that aren't really designed for that. So just keep an eye on it. But you can get a handful of these, and you can just get your normal 80-12 needles, from your local supplier, and just get right into it. I mean, if you're lazy like me, you don't want to get those needles, and you just want to be stubborn and try to thread a 75-11, or hole. I mean, hey, if you want to do it, go for it. But the 80-12s will definitely set you free on your path away from frustration. Trying to.
I think I can do this. I don't want
to
sit there and you're like stabbing at it for 15 minutes.
It's not that you can. It's that
I was having difficulty threading a 75 with just 40 weight thread today.
Yeah, exactly. So
this was actually a question that we had in the Discord that I don't think that we covered.
oh, great.
But he dropped it there again. Do you have any unusual non-standard techniques that jump to mind when pushing the boundaries on hat embroidery?
That's a great question. In fact, I'll take it back to when we were at Impressions. One of Justin's first questions to me about this was, how have you translated this to hats? And we had a few people in the crowd that asked the very similar questions. How is this translated to hats? And to be perfectly 100% transparent, honest, I don't know. I've never really tried it much, and I think it's just because, like for example, a dad hat in the world of high-end retail, or at least massive retail, we're sewing on panels and then we assemble the hat. We're not sewing on the final three-dimensional surface that someone would have to sew on. So it's not that it can't be done. I have no idea what sewing thread does with puff embroidery. Justin probably knows better than me, as he's probably experimented already with some of this, but it has great tensile strength. Go ahead.
I've got ideas in my head. I have not.
Okay, yeah, he's locked and loaded. Yeah, I love it. I don't really know, just because again, that part of it has been spoiled with those types of things. But I will say this though. I have had scenarios where let's say we were out of black 40 weight thread, and I went and I grabbed 6 spools of black sewing thread that we had, and I just put it right back into the program without adjusting any density and just let it roll, and it looked great, and it was on hats. And we had theoretically, if I remember correctly, we had X amount of breaks on the embroidery thread, and we had probably 30% less breaks on the sewing thread. So sewing thread it's pretty tough stuff. Again, when it's a color like black, you can get away with it because black equals the absorption of light. So if you have, it's kind of like saying, if you guys have experienced black plastisol versus black water base always looks way darker than black plastisol, because plastisol has a sheen to it. It's plastic, And so when you have that nice spun polyester on or cotton wrapped polyester thread that you put in place of it, it just looks even deeper and darker. So the downside is, when you do this, and every embroidery shop needs to hear this, if you replace embroidery thread once with sewing thread, now you have to do that job like that every time, because they're going to get better.
Exactly.
So just keep that in mind.
Now, quickly, Joe, I know there's a couple of people that came a little bit late, and they're still asking kind of the same questions regarding thread in relation to needles. Do you have that information on appliquejoe.com?
I have, yes. Everything that we have here, I have put on my website. So you guys can go and check that out. And then if you don't like something, just send me an email, and I can see what I can do to help you out.
I just dropped that in the comments, his website. So that information, really good information regarding the relationship between the different threads to the needle sizes, gives you a nice chart. I'll pull this up real quick.
Yep.
Gives you a chart of text sizes in relation to what we know, pretty much widely know as far as weight sizes when we buy thread, as far as embroidery thread. But yeah, this information's on his site. Good information to know if you are experimenting with these different threads. You should probably pick up a package or 2 of different size needles as well, so you can not be fighting with those smaller needles when you're getting into the bigger text sizes.
Yep, exactly. And then once again too, for those who are hearing my spiel about the FHS needles, it's in the works. I found some. I just have to make sure that I can distribute them, appropriately. But basically, what I'm going to tell you about the needles is that, when I started this, we didn't have those needles. We just had to run a little bit slower. So I know you guys can do it. I know it's possible because I've done it before, and I've done it on older machines. But just keep it in mind that if it's not working for you, reach out to the forum. I'm going to do everything I can to answer your questions, to get you on the right foot, because it's important for everybody to know that I'm not just talking out the side of my mouth here. This is actually a completely different way of thinking. In fact, I credit this, I was very blessed to have people who took me under the wing to show them traditional embroidery, but I was even more blessed for people to be able to push me and to support me to come up with things that just don't exist or that we didn't know anything about. So I wouldn't have gone down that path if I truly wasn't, understanding what needs to happen at that level of what does it take to do something different.
Right.
And that's, I think, the big takeaway here is that I would never leave you down. I would never lead anyone down the pathway that they would, accidentally or incidentally and destroy their machine. But I would like for folks to build them up and encourage them to go out and try some different things. It's not going to hurt you to buy a extra spool or two of thread, a couple of different needle sizes, and give it a shot, with some different digitizings. But in Ramona's, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, just something to keep in mind, when you're making the suggestion that, to do something like this to slow your machine down, that, for instance, that crest that you showed us, using normal densities and normal embroidery thread, that, a crest that size, you can get upwards of 20,000 plus stitches. So telling somebody, hey, slow your machine down to 600 to 500 stitches per minute, yeah, that's going to be painful to watch something like that run.
It is.
But when you're digitizing and you're using these threads, and it was, what'd you say, it was like 8,000 stitches.
Yeah.
It's give or take that, as far as your runtime and the amount of stitches that you're going to be saving using these.
And we have to remember too that, we're talking about a change of culture here, folks. Like, it's not just a couple of threads and needles different than what you're doing. This is the production equivalent of, like, when the company finally decides to go paperless, and they take all the paper orders that they had on the floor and they just put them in a dumpster and they burn them in front of the entire company to symbolize how we're going paperless, people. So get with it. This is the same thing. It's just, imagine starting from scratch. What you know, but building burned down, Lord forbid, and you have to start again. And now you actually have a cleaner canvas and a cleaner slate. So in a way, you kind of have to unlearn what you know to be able to do this right. But you pointed it out great. I mean, this is a different headspace for these techniques. It's not just a couple of settings different, even though I'm saying it is that easy. Yes, it is that easy, but you just got to think. I mean, because like Ramona, I wish I would have been able to jump in front of that bus and just say, hey, no, use this. If you're going to use this thread, just use the same needles you're using, and then let's reevaluate. Let's also evaluate how you hooped it. Let's evaluate how you hooped it. All these different things to make sure that it's going to come out as good as it possibly can.
So speaking of settings, I know we talked about a lot about density as far as satins and fills. What would you change as far as he's referring to a design that's basically, it was like just lined art that I did for him.
Yeah.
That it was all running stitches basically. Do you change anything as far as stitch lengths when you're doing?
I would just yield to longer stitch lengths so that you get better credit of the stitch laying on top of the fabric than you normally would, as opposed to, let's say, like with digitizers, when we manually like jump in between letters, we dig it in there with tight stitches so we don't have to trim that later. Same concept, just just in reverse. Yeah. I wouldn't use any solvies or anything unless you were really worried about the garment shrinking and the thread length becoming loose because of that. But that's such an extreme scenario. I wouldn't worry too much about that. Usually the thread and the fabric after it's washed kind of shrink together. So I'm not worried too much about that. But
all right. Well, before we grab any more questions, I want to give you a chance to plug your new podcast that you're doing, right?
Yes. So if you guys aren't familiar, if you don't follow me already, please, Amber Creative and Jeremy Picker and I are going to be doing this podcast. We've launched the first episode, a little rough. We're trying to figure out some of the nuances, but basically we're going to be doing a couple of ideas. One of is we're going to be giving away some prizes. We're going to be doing some guess the stitches. We're going to get some stitch files from some of our awesome professionals in the industry. And I think that Justin and Jeff have already said they're going to help out. So we're going to get some files from them, and we're going to throw it out there and give away some prizes and see how you guys can guess some of those things. The other thing we're going to do, and forgive me here, the podcast is called Dudes of Thread, and we're gonna put the link here for you guys to follow. But it's Dudes of Thread, and we're gonna have another segment where if you've got a logo that you've been working with and you just need to elevate that logo, we have if you go to amber.com with a 3, amber.com, go to our website and click on blog. You're going to see the Dudes of Thread podcast on there. And then we actually have a form that you can fill out. And if you want to upload some art that you're already working with, we're going to take that art and we're going to pick one, and we're going to feature that art and what are some of like the different ideas that you can do to get that particular piece of art elevated into a bit more of a, luxurious, perceived higher in value state. So we're
awesome.
really excited to be able to do that, just and add that just to kind of keep that interaction and help people out with just, how many different ideas could you have just with the Starbucks logo alone? I mean, good God, there's so many things we could do with that, So, why not anybody else's logo that they've been working with? You got a 20+ year customer and you want to show them something amazing. They're a great customer. They always like buying and they're asking for newer things. We're trying to help with that. We're absolutely trying to help with that. So thanks for the opportunity for us to plug that.
Yeah.
Well, I've got one question here that it was actually asked by Jeremy, and I think it's an awesome one to close on because I know that you guys have to.
I've been waiting for this one. Yes.
So we'll go ahead and we'll bring this one up right here. What are some tips for shops that might not have a graphics department in-house to help their top VIPs try something new, get a little more creative on the right project?
Yeah, this is a really good question, one that he knows I wasn't prepared for, right? So
I have one question I really hope doesn't come up, and then he asks it.
Yeah, right.
What are friends are for, huh?
Right, exactly. No, it's a great question, though. I think it's an amazing question. Like, for folks that don't have in-house graphics, what do you do? Do you lean completely on your digitizer if that's the case? Do you I think the best thing, as Jeremy's always campaigned for, is his amazing dedication to Pinterest is probably one of the best things to gather. If you can make a board that helps the Pinterest algorithm figure out that these are the looks you need, you're going to be able to share that with whomever you're trying to work with, whether it's a factory or a design firm, etc., and get them to draw things up so that just for example, the Joe's Crab Shack that I showed you guys, everyone knows what that logo looks like. That all I did was put Vermilana in the place of ink. That's really all I did. It's not magic, but somehow it looks like magic because it doesn't look like normal embroidery. So if you could take those little swatches, those little inspirations of this is the stitching I want it to look like, just put it in this spot. That's really what call outs are for again, factories, design firms, etc. And I think that's probably one of the better strategies to have. If your current design firm, or if they're not, coming through, keep looking around. I mean, we at Amber, we're always trying to up the game, and we're showing people all this really, really cool stuff. But unfortunately, you don't see it as cool because it's a virtual version of it. It's not realistic to do something like this, in real time every time. So we're doing
one of the most difficult things to do is to show a concept, because it's not, I get asked that a lot, especially from new people from the industry. I'll quote something and say, hey, this and this need to be adjusted so it'll be, that you get a quality design. I'm like, well, can we get a sample of what the digitizing is going to look like?
Sure, exactly.
Yeah,
and you're exactly right. And also to kind of close out Jeremy's question here is that, you've got some executives, you got some decision makers out there that want to elevate their swag for their people. They're especially if it's self promo. Don't ever stop asking for something better than what you're getting. That would probably be my big piece of advice and takeaway. It's like don't ever stop asking until you get what you want. It's worked for me thus far. So I would have to say that's a big thing that's worked out for me in my career. Be kind and don't stop asking and show people what you want, because somebody in the industry knows, oh yeah, ask these guys. They know where to get that done.
Right.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think that's really good to close out on there. We have with us Joe Kramar from Amber Creative, Appliqué Joe, and soon or current Dudes of Thread
Use the
podcast.
Thread podcast.
Dudes of Thread podcast. We have Justin Armenta from JH Digitizing Studios, and I'm Jeff Fuller from Fuller Embroidery Works, and we are all here representing the Embroidery Nerd today. We'd like to thank you guys for your time, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.